Mike, welcome to the show. We appreciate you being on tonight.
Thanks for the invitation, Joe.
Okay, let's talk about the rat of the week. Why is Bayer Corporation the rat of the week?
Internal documents show that after this company positively, absolutely knew that they had a medication that was infected with the AIDS virus, they took the product off the market in the U.S. and then they dumped it in France, Europe, Asia, and Latin America. The medicine's called Factor 8. It was an injection medicine that was used for hemophiliacs, mostly children. Children had been born with an incurable disease.
Hold on, Mike. So hold on. So you're telling me that Bayer knew that this drug was infected with the AIDS virus. They yanked it from the market in America, and then they dumped it in markets overseas?
They had to figure out a way, Joe, to make a profit on a product that they could not sell in America. So they made a huge profit. They dropped the product in Japan, Spain, and France. By the way, Joe, government officials in France that allowed that to happen actually had to go to prison for it. In America, not one corporate executive for this company has been indicted or even criminally investigated by our Justice Department.
Why not? What, you're telling me that these people that dumped this AIDS-tainted blood in foreign countries, who killed children, have not been taken to task in the United States?
It's worse than that. The U.S. government allowed it to happen. The FDA allowed this to happen. And now the government is completely looking the other way. Thousands of innocent hemophiliacs have died from the AIDS virus. And not only they're dying, their family members are dying because they're becoming infected with the disease.
Yes, we are back. And we are black. That is right. It is 6:47 in the p.m. here on May the 24th, 2024. The future's here. The future's now. Yes, it is. That was actually Joe Scarborough from MSNBC before he became a complete hack, talking about Bayer willingly giving people the AIDS virus back in the 80s and 90s. And the reason that I thought about this story was because just this week, the victims of the UK's infected blood scandal have actually started receiving their final compensation payments for this year. This was from the Associated Press. Victims of the UK's infected blood scandal, in which tens of thousands of people were infected by contaminated blood or blood products provided by the Public Health Service, will start receiving their final compensation payments this year. They just ruled over there in the UK. The officials announced that the compensation plans a day after the publication of a report that found civil servants and doctors exposed patients to unacceptable risks by giving them blood transfusions or blood products tainted with HIV or hepatitis in the 1970s to the early 90s. This scandal is actually seen as the deadliest disaster in the history of Britain's state-run National Health Service since its inception in 1948. Their Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said on Monday that he apologized for the decades-long moral failure at the heart of our national life. The report said successive UK governments refused to admit wrongdoing and tried to cover up the scandal, in which an estimated 3,000 people died after receiving the contaminated blood or blood products. In total, the report said about 30,000 people were infected with HIV or hepatitis C, a kind of liver infection. Man, imagine like getting hepatitis C and being like, woo, woo, I lucked out, boy. I just got hepatitis C. Good God. I'm one of the lucky ones. Cabinet Office Minister John Glenn told lawmakers on Tuesday that he recognized that the time is of the essence and that victims who need payments most urgently will receive a further interim compensation of £210,000, which is really about $267,000 within 90 days, ahead of the establishment of the full payment plan. Campaigners have fought for decades to bring official failings to light and secure government compensation. The inquiry was finally approved in 2017, and over the past 4 years, it reviewed evidence from more than 5,000 witnesses and over 100,000 documents. Many of the affected were people with hemophilia, a condition affecting the blood's ability to clot. In the 1970s, patients were given a new treatment from the United States that contained plasma from high-risk donors, including prison inmates who were paid to give blood. Because manufacturers of the treatment mixed plasma from thousands of donors, one infected donor would compromise the whole batch. Wow. The report said that around 1,250 people with bleeding disorders, including 380 children, were infected with HIV-tainted blood products. 3/4 of them have died. Good God. Up to 5,000 others who received the blood products developed chronic hepatitis C. Ooh. An estimated 26,800 others were also infected with hepatitis C after receiving these blood transfusions, often given in hospitals after childbirth, surgery, or an accident. The disaster could have been largely avoided had officials taken steps to address the known risks linked to blood transfusions or the use of these blood products. The report concluded, adding that the UK lagged behind other developed countries in introducing rigorous screening of blood products and blood donor selection. So this is the UK part of the scandal. This was actually a multi-country scandal, but just this week, the people who were infected in Great Britain are just now starting to get paid. And you know, you think about it, this has been about a 40-year scandal for them to just get about $270,000. Ain't really, I mean, that's really not that much. I mean, over 40 years, you got to suffer for 40 years, you get $267,000. I don't know about, and 3/4 of the people who are infected are dead now. But anyway, that's the UK part of the scandal. What about the American part of the scandal? Well, let's get into it, folks. The American portion of the scandal involves one of my favorite people in the world, a man who I always speak glowingly about on this show, one William Jefferson Clinton, but y'all knew him as Bill. The year he became the governor of Arkansas, the state prison board awarded a fat contract. Oh, I want to give shouts to Counterpunch for doing a lot of research on this. That's where I found a lot of the information from this story. But big shout out to Counterpunch, Jeffrey Sinclair, all those people. But anyway, the year Bill Clinton became governor of Arkansas, that state's prison board awarded a fat contract to a Little Rock company called Health Management Associates, or HMA. That company was paid $3 million a year to run medical services for the state's prison system, which had been blasted in rulings by the U.S. Supreme Court, as listen to this, as an evil place run by some evil men. HMA not only made money from providing medical care to prisoners, but it also started a profitable side venture, blood mining. This company paid prisoners $7 per pint of their blood. HMA then sold the blood on the international plasma market for $50 a pint, splitting the proceeds 50-50 with the Arkansas Department of Corrections. Since Arkansas is one of the few states that does not pay prisoners for their labor, inmates were frequent donors at the so-called blood clinic. So these Arkansas prisoners were extremely desperate, particularly desperate because the state of Arkansas does not pay them. Like, they don't allow them to have jobs like in a lot of other states. Prisoners can have little jobs within the prison and earn some money so that they can have some cigarettes or candy or whatever. Arkansas did not allow them to do that. They actually, the Clintons, when they were in office in Arkansas, actually had slaves, prison labor, slaves working at the governor's mansion. So, I mean, that's just to illustrate the quality of person we're dealing with here. Hundreds of prisoners sold as much as 2 pints a week to HMA. The blood was then sold to pharmaceutical companies such as Bayer, as we heard in the intro from Joe Scarborough and Mike Paolo Antonio, if I'm not mistaken. Paolo Antonio? Such as Bayer and Baxter International, blood banks such as the Red Cross, and so-called blood fractionizers who transformed the blood into medicines for hemophiliacs. HMA's contract with the Arkansas Department of Corrections and its entry into the blood market coincided with the rise of AIDS in the United States. Regardless, HMA did not screen. They did not screen the torrents of prisoner blood, even after the FDA issued special alerts about the higher incidence of AIDS and hepatitis in prison populations. So they knew that they were purposely mining this blood from extremely at-risk prison populations, and they still did it. And didn't even screen. When American drug companies and blood fractionizers stopped buying blood taken from prisoners in the early 80s, HMA turned to the international blood market. There's an international blood market? Good God. Selling to companies in Italy, France, Spain, and Japan. But the prime buyer of HMA's tainted blood, largely drawn from Cummings Unit prisoners in Grady, Arkansas, was a notorious Canadian firm called Continental Pharma Cryosan Limited. Cryosan had a shady reputation in the medical industry. It had been nabbed importing blood taken from Russian cadavers, good God, and relabeling it as though it was from Swedish volunteers. The company had also marketed blood taken from Haitian slums. Good God. Oh, Lord. Cryosan passed the Arkansas prison blood on to the Canadian Red Cross and to European and Asian companies. The blood was recalled in 1983 after the FDA discovered contamination, but less than 1/6 of the blood was recovered. Wow. In Canada alone, more than 7,000 people have died from the contaminated blood transfusion, many of them hemophiliacs. More than 4,000 of them died of AIDS. Another 40,000 people in Canada have contracted various forms of hepatitis. Man, this is just blatantly evil stuff right here. Dr. Francis Bud Henderson started the HMA in the 1970s. As the company began to expand, he brought in a Little Rock banker named Leonard Dunn to run this firm. Dunn was a political ally and friend of the Clintons. He was appointed by Clinton to sit on the Arkansas Industrial Development Commission and serve as its finance chair of Clinton's 1990 gubernatorial campaign. Later that same year, Dunn purchased the Madison Guarantee Savings and Loan, later to achieve great notoriety in the Whitewater scandal. You guys remember the Whitewater scandal that the Republicans were trying to get the Clintons on back in the 90s? Well, he was a part of this. From Clinton's business partner, James McDougal. Dunn later served as the chief of staff to Arkansas Lieutenant Governor Winthrop Rockefeller. Now, Dunn's many ties to the Clintons served HMA well long after the company came under scrutiny for both abusive treatment of prison patients and shoddy management of the blood center. In 1983, the Food and Drug Administration stripped HMA of its license to sell blood after it found that the company had failed to exclude donors who had tested positive for hepatitis B, often a precursor of HIV. So last week, I got some pushback. A lot of people like, hey, what are you talking about COVID? Why do you talk about the drug companies like this? This is why. This is why I talk about the drug companies like this. This is why I talk about our politicians who are owned by the drug companies like this. You see, as you know, the video from Joe Scarborough on MSNBC told you, Bayer knowingly exposed people to AIDS. Knowingly gave people AIDS. And this company, because they had ties to Bill Clinton and all their political posturing, were able to get away with it. Nobody went to jail behind this. Nobody goes to jail behind any of this. That's why last week when I was talking about people finally admitting about the side effects of the COVID vaccine, this is why I do those stories. Because these drug companies, these politicians, they do not give a doggone about you. They will give you AIDS. They will give you hepatitis. They will give you... COVID-19 is probably one of the least dangerous things they'll give you. Like seriously, they will give you everything under the sun and then fight like a dog to keep from having to compensate you or your family member if, God forbid, you pass away from whatever it is they gave you. These people don't have a conscience. That is the people running these drug companies. Just look at Purdue Pharma. The Sackler family that runs Purdue Pharma. They purposely flooded American cities with drugs, legal drugs, the man's drugs, and got millions of people addicted to the point where we were breaking the record for drug overdoses every single year the last 4 years up into this last year. This last year was the first year in about 5 years that we hadn't broken the all-time record for drug overdoses in American history. Thanks to the Sackler family. The Sackler family got a financial fine. They just got a fine that didn't even really put a dent in their fortune. And get this, they weren't allowed, I know this is going to be very harsh, folks. They weren't allowed to put their name on any museums. For I think it was 10 years or something. They could not put their name on any museums or anything like that for 10 years. That was their big punishment. For the hundreds of thousands of people who died after using their products. That's who these people are. That is who these people are. These politicians, these drug companies. Don't trust them. And the corporate media, as I've told you plenty of times, is owned and controlled by these people. So you can't trust them either. They will vilify you for saying you do your own research, or you Google this, or you Google that. Read as much as you can about whatever it is they are trying to force on you and give you, because you don't know, it could save your life. Obviously, rest in peace to all the victims of this tainted blood scandal. And a pox on the house of all the politicians and businessmen who knew about this scandal and didn't do anything to stop it. All right, folks. We're going to lighten the mood when we come back. Can't get much heavier than what we just talked about. With the happy happies. We'll be right back after these.